Suddenly, our electricity bill skyrocketed. When we hurriedly called the utility company, the worker came over and said with a puzzled expression,
There was this line here.
as James and I rushed over, the worker gently moved a nearby potted plant so we could see more clearly. From the external outlet of our house, an unfamiliar wire extended towards his parents' house.
Do you recognize this wire?
At the worker's question, James and I exchanged glances. We were probably thinking the same thing. Hey, James, could this be?
Yea, no doubt. This is why our bill was through the roof.
James then casually reached for the outlet and swiftly pulled out the wire. At that moment, a shrill scream came from the direction of his parents' house.
Wow.
That must be Mary. Next, I thought I heard some hysterical mumbling, and then the voice came out the door, heading our way. And then, bursting through the hedge, came Mary, full of momentum. I'm Emma, 32 years old, stay-at-home wife. My hobby is eating limited edition sweets. I gather information about sweets every day by asking friends or researching myself. The one who indulges in my hobby with me is my kind husband, James. James and I have been together since college and are the same age. I've loved the consistently kind James from the moment we met until now. By the way, I also loved his parents who raised such a person like James. Many of my married friends struggle with mill issues. I've even heard stories about divorces caused by the mill. Fortunately, such stories are irrelevant to our family. Mary, like me, loves sweets, and she's always delighted when I bring her recommended treats, while Robert, though not a man of many words, always has a smile and gives a sense of reassurance. They both dote on me, and I adore them too. Mary and Robert, his parents, now live about a 30-minute drive away. Not too close, not too far, just the right distance. But sometimes I think, maybe I could live with these two. I don't want to live together, but perhaps we could get along well. I like them so much that I think these things. But life isn't always so sweet, as I would later realize. One day, I was puzzled by some news James told me. Wait, Mary and them? Unbelievably, Mary and Robert are moving into the vacant house next door to us. I always thought James's parents owned their home, but it turns out they were renting. They considered moving because their place was getting old. When they learned the house next to ours was vacant, they took interest. Now we're suddenly living so close. I'm immediately filled with anxiety. Up until now, we've gotten along well with his parents, but is it really going to be okay? Living next door means we could see each other every day if we wanted to. I like Mary and Robert, but seeing them every day might be honestly tough. But it's too late now to say please don't move in, it's too close. When James heard about the move, he gently suggested to his parents that it might not be a good idea. However, they didn't listen, saying, "We get along so well now, it'll be fine." I feel like slapping myself for ever thinking we could actually live together. As my anxiety grows, Mary and Robert have moved in. Though I was cautious at first, it seemed okay initially. We maintained a good distance and managed some boundaries. However, as time went on, Mary became increasingly pushy, overbearing. She practically mastered all the no-no behaviors you hear about. She started dropping by and announced, and once inside, she'd make herself at home. Not just that, but it seemed like our every move was being monitored. And then, after finishing her routine of unannounced visits and dinner checks, Mary made an outrageous comment.
Hey, Emma, I've been thinking, why don't you stop locking your doors?
What? I couldn't believe my ears. Can you believe it? In this day and age, Mill is suggesting I shouldn't lock our house? Not locking means anyone could come in at any time? That's not reassuring at all. Of course, I'm against it. Especially since Mary moved in next door, even the doorbell ringing makes me jump, let alone the thought that Mary could walk into our house without us noticing. Of course, I'm against that. With all the dangers these days, I guess not locking the doors would be pretty scary. I said with a smile, trying not to offend her, then Mary frowned.
Well, Emma, you're such a worrier, aren't you? But it'll be fine. Once we get to know the neighbors better, I'll ask them to keep an eye out for us. Until then, Robert and I are here. We'll be around often.
I understand that her words come from a place of kindness and are meant to be helpful. That's why I couldn't tell her that her frequent visits are becoming a burden. But there's a limit to my patience. Last week, Mary was around every single day. I end up having tea time with Mary at our house every day. Naturally, spending so much time together can lead to frustration. I've come to truly realize the importance of maintaining the right distance in the relationship between Mill and DIL. She'd leave unwanted potted plants in her garden or plant flowers without asking. Right now, Mary is really doing as she pleases. If it were once every few months, maybe I could handle it, but it's a different story every day. Since then, Mary has repeatedly brought up the issue of not locking the doors. Somehow, I got her to understand that I'm just highly security conscious. But then, Mary started insisting that I wanted a spare key. It's something James will have to handle. There's no way I can give such a terrifying item to Mary as she is now. Although I found Mary's behavior challenging, I hadn't yet come to dislike her. She can be a bit meddlesome at times, but it comes from Mary's goodwill. Instead, I felt more guilty about rejecting her. However, as time passed, my feelings began to change. I'm not sure if I changed, if Mary changed, or if we both did, or what caused it. I just started to feel discomfort and annoyance at Mary's remarks. It was a few months after Mary and Robert moved in next door. Visits from Mary after lunch had become a routine part of life in our home. Curious, I asked what Robert was doing. It seems he's usually out walking or shopping by himself. I suggested Mary should join him, but she declined, saying, "Walking tires me out." Recently, Mary has completely taken on the role of an overbearing Mill. When I make coffee, whereas she used to simply say thank you and enjoy it, now she always has a complaint like it's lukewarm or it's too weak. Whenever she opens her mouth, it's either gossip about the neighbors or outright criticism. Being with Mary brings out negative feelings. Still, unable to refuse her, I just nod along with a forced smile.
It's a shame, isn't it? The grass over there keeps growing wildly. I'm almost tempted to go cut it myself.
Today, Mary was passionately talking about a neighbor's neglected garden.
And so I was going to say, oh,
Mary suddenly stopped talking, so I instinctively followed her gaze, which had turned towards the bookshelf. Perhaps she found a book that interested her? It would be nice if we could read together. It'd be quiet, at least. Did you find a book that interests you? As I stood up to head towards the bookshelf, Mary, instead, pulled something from the rack next to it. Mary, that's not okay. I reached out in a panic as she opened it with an innocent look. Then, with a pleased expression, she exclaimed,
Oh my, Emma, looks like you overspent last month. Wow, your electricity bill is twice as much as ours.
Mary was examining it as if it were a tabloid magazine. It was our household budget book. Please stop. Give it back. As I snatched it away, Mary chuckled.
You don't need to rush so much. It seems like you find it a bit challenging to save money, Emma. James might feel a bit unfortunate to have a wife who struggles with saving. Maybe you could try a little harder.
I could feel my face getting hot. The cover and the spine clearly labeled it as a household budget book. Yet, she had the audacity to open someone else's budget book without permission.
Also, about the sweets, I understand the appeal of limited editions, but a wife you can't save shouldn't be indulging in sweets.
Furthermore, Mary kept nagging, complaining, "You're spending too much on groceries, and the electricity bill is unbelievable." Then she went on to brag about how good she was at saving money. After talking for a while, she seemed satisfied and left. After Mary went home, I couldn't stop crying out of frustration. Maybe it was all the accumulated stress. I had clearly reached my limit. I cried until James came home.
You don't have to worry about what Mom said, but I guess that's impossible. I'm really sorry. I'll tell her not to come over anymore.
Yes, please. Comforted by James, I felt a bit calmer and took the opportunity to discuss something else. It was about the electricity bill. As Mary pointed out, it was high. Despite not changing anything, it had skyrocketed in the past few months. I had been concerned but was too distracted by dealing with Mary lately. James looked at the electricity bill and frowned.
This is strange indeed.
Right?
The next bill is due soon. If it still looks odd, we should contact the power company.
A few days later, we received a bill for more than double the usual amount at $1,300. That's not right. We panicked and decided to have the electric company come over to check. The utility worker inspected carefully. Then it seemed he found something unusual, and we were called over.
There was this line here.
As James and I rushed over, the worker moved a nearby potted plant to give us a better view. Hidden under long leaves was an external outlet that we had forgotten about since it had never been used since the house was built. From that outlet, as the worker pointed out, a wire extended towards Mary and Robert's house.
Do you recognize this wire?
James and I looked at each other, probably thinking the same thing. Hey, James, could this be?
Yea, no doubt. This is why our electric bill has skyrocketed.
Just to be sure, we followed the wire with the worker. After moving through the hedge and overgrown weeds, the wire indeed entered Mary and Robert's shed. We couldn't see where it connected inside their house, but it was clear they were involved. The worker's expression turned grim. "Should I call the police?" he asked us.
No, That might be necessary, but let's talk it over first. This house belongs to the parents after all.
The worker, who was initially suspected of electricity theft, seemed relieved when he learned it was a family matter, his expression softening.
All right, I'll leave you to it then.
Yes, thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it.
We thanked the worker and watched him as he headed back to our driveway. Once he left, we faced each other to think. James held his head and sighed deeply.
I'm sorry for having such a mother.
Don't worry about it, but that's easier said than done. What do we do now? Most likely, Mary and Robert were home as usual. Should we confront them now, or plan our approach first? James, hand over his mouth, walked back to the area of the external outlet. The potted plant that the worker had moved was still aside, making the outlet clearly visible. Thinking back, perhaps Mary had intentionally placed the potted plant there to hide it. I felt bad for suspecting her, but it seemed the only plausible explanation.
What does this connect to?
James casually reached for the outlet and swiftly pulled out the wiring. Oh, is it okay to pull that out?
I just did. Thinking about how they've been stealing our electricity all this time just makes me mad. Well, the utility worker is a witness. They can't wiggle out of this one easily. We have that as a backup, too.
That makes sense. I nodded in agreement. That's when it happened.
Oh,
A high-pitched scream came from the direction of his parents' house. It must have been Mary. Next, I thought I heard some hysterical mumbling, and then the voice came out the door, heading our way. And then, bursting through the hedge, came Mary, full of momentum. She probably didn't expect anyone to be there. When Mary saw us, she let out a voice filled with shock.
oh no, you startled me. What are you two doing here?
She snapped at us, so I stood my ground and retorted, "What about you, Mary? Do you have some business in our yard? You seemed quite flustered."
That is,
Mary awkwardly averted her eyes. Behind her, James firmly held the disconnected wire. When she sight Mary exclaimed and tried to snatch it from James's hand. James twisted away, hiding the wire behind him.
what are you doing?
No, that's my line.
James thrust the wiring in front of Mary's face and said in a low, stern voice,
This was plugged into our outlet.
emphasizing our. James saw Mary's eyes dart around, looking upwards.
So what?
Do you know where this wiring leads?
I don't know anything about that. Besides, plug it back in. Because of that being unplugged, we're having a lot of trouble over here.
Demanding it be plugged back in without knowing where it leads. Moreover, she claimed that they were suffering damage because it had been unplugged. It was practically the same as confessing, "I did it." However, Mary showed no signs of remorse, just panic. I knew why Mary was panicking. I stood next to James and gave a slight smile. "Mary, please calm down. How can we plug in a wire when we don't even know where it leads? This outlet belongs to our house."
Well, it's okay to plug it back in, just for a bit, so.
"Oh, Mary, didn't you say this to me? Even if it's just electricity, don't waste it. You even said it was pitiful for James to have a wife who can't save on electricity."
No, that's.
Mary was fidgeting nervously. "I won't make it," she muttered quietly. seemingly on the verge of panic.
What time is it now?
It's 9:57,
Oh, it's too late.
she cried out and then ran back home, stumbling as she went. James was puzzled by Mary's strange behavior, but I knew the reason behind it. I whispered to James,
What? So that's it.
"So if we wait at home, she'll probably come by eventually."
Right?
James threw the wiring down and we headed back to our house. A few minutes later, there was a rattling at the door, followed by the doorbell. It was Mary. I unlocked the door and opened it. "Hi, Mary. About what happened earlier."
Be quiet. Move.
As soon as I opened the door, Mary pushed past me with a click of her tongue and entered. She expressed her displeasure with her whole body. Stomping like a monster, she made her way to the living room and plopped her heavy body onto the sofa. James, who was in the living room, started to speak with a puzzled frown, but Mary cut in just a bit quicker.
I'm thirsty. What about the coffee? You're slow. You should move before being asked. That's the rule, isn't it?
Yes.
And you locked the door again, didn't you? This is why people in the neighborhood say that DIL over there is so cold. As if there's anything in this house worth stealing. It's annoying how snobbish you are.
Mary continued to grumble. "Oh no, this is too much. I can't take it anymore." I grabbed a half-finished water bottle nearby and slammed it down on the table in front of Mary. She froze, eyes wide open.
Emma.
"Here, have some coffee. And you said there's nothing to steal, but unfortunately, there are greedy and mean people out there. For example, those who secretly steal electricity." Mary's face showed signs of disturbance. I sat down next to her. Even though I was right beside her, she wouldn't even look at me anymore. Looking down, her face turned pale.
What's wrong, Emma? You're completely different.
"Too bad, Mary. Even I have my limits. Did you think I was a saint?" I meant it as a joke, but to Mary, it might as well have been a demon she encountered, judging by the fear on her face. Mary looked to James for help, but he just silently shook his head. Mary was completely isolated. Beside her was a wife who had shed her saintly guise and turned into a demon, and James, standing a little distance away, showed no signs of coming to her rescue. With that, Mary's next move was predictable.
Sorry, I just remembered something urgent. I need to leave now.
"I won't let you go." As Mary tried to get up from the sofa, I firmly pressed her shoulder down. Her bottom sank back into the sofa.
Emma, really, today
"You were the one who said you were thirsty, Mary. Are you saying you can't drink my coffee? After making such a fuss about it, that would be unacceptable, right?" Mary reached for the water bottle with tears in her eyes, but James stopped her. Relieved, Mary didn't realize I wasn't actually trying to make her drink the leftover coffee. The real issue was yet to be addressed. "When did you start stealing our electricity?"
I haven't stolen anything. That sounds so malicious.
"But the wire plugged into our outlet was leading to your house, wasn't it?" Mary struggled to find words, her mouth opening and closing several times, but she couldn't come up with a good excuse. In fact, there was no way she could talk her way out of this situation. Is Mary really that naive? All that was left was for Mary to admit and apologize. That's what I thought, but it seemed luck was on Mary's side a little. The doorbell rang, and standing there was Robert.
Is Mom here?
Apparently, Robert had gone out for a bit and returned to find the front door unlocked, the TV still on, and no sign of Mary, which worried him.
Robert.
Robert was confused by Mary's distraught appearance. Then James explained everything from the beginning. After thinking for a moment, Robert slowly began to speak.
Could this be some kind of mistake?
Understandably finding it hard to believe that Mary could be secretly stealing electricity from our house? Then who installed that wiring? It's not like a stranger would just randomly connect their house to someone else's wiring. Robert crossed his arms and thought for a moment, then nodded and stood up. All right, let's go check it out. But Mary, visibly shaken, tried to stop him, but Robert asked James to show him where the outlet was and walked over to it. The wiring ran into a shed and was out of sight. When Robert went to check it out, he came back pale-faced. As soon as he returned, he made Mary apologize.
I'm sorry. I truly am very sorry.
Mary was silent, looking down. It's like a scolded child. According to Robert, the wiring had been connected through an extension cord to a battery and Mary's computer. The battery had been purchased when they moved in. Apparently, a salesman had told her it was economical to charge it during the cheaper nighttime electricity rates and use it during the day. Mary had been doing exactly that, charging the battery at night using our electricity, then using it during the day at her house. Initially, that was all, but since there were free sockets on the extension cord, she had plugged in her computer and other household items as well. Eventually, she started using our electricity all the time, not just at night. Mary had the nerve to justify her actions by saying it was more economical. Naturally, I was furious not just because she was stealing electricity. However, what was even more infuriating was that despite Mary's constant criticism and condescension towards me, she had been lying all along. You've repeatedly said how pitiful it is for James to have a wife who can't save, who buys sweets instead of saving.
Facts are facts.
It's almost impressive how unrepentant she is. Saving money by using someone else's electricity isn't saving, Mary. It's just a crime. I continued. And don't think I'll let this slide just because we're family. If you were sincerely apologetic, it might be different. But with your current attitude, we might have to involve the police. Mary looked shocked. Maybe she thought this would just blow over.
What kind of DIL are you? Are you really trying to betray your own family?
Don't twist my words. Because we're family, I expect you to make amends. As I pulled out my smartphone, Mary panicked and lunged at me. James quickly restrained her.
Do you have any evidence? You don't have.
With all this evidence already laid out, do you still need more? If so, I'll show you something conclusive. I pointed towards the roof. Mary squinted to see. Then she gasped. Yes, our house is equipped with security cameras. Coincidentally, the area around the outlet was within the camera's range. Mary murmured a small law. Is this sufficient evidence? And there's more?
There's more.
Mary, the reason you were so rushed today is because it was the release day for those limited edition suites, wasn't it?
No way.
I smiled wryly. Yes, I had a friend pick them up for me, so I got them without any trouble. If you hadn't been stealing electricity, perhaps your computer would have been connected and you could have bought them too, but unfortunately, you missed out. Mary trembled and then collapsed in a heap on the spot. After discussing it with James, we decided not to turn Mary into the police. Although she admitted it and we had evidence, the hassle and the fact that it involved family meant it could easily be brushed off. Instead, we decided to make Mary and Robert pay for the electricity and an apology fee. While it felt awkward to live so close, we needed to set this straight for our peace of mind. Feeling uncomfortable, they eventually kept to themselves, and one day, we received some welcome news. That's Mary and Robert were moving back to their old home. Apparently, word about the electricity theft had leaked, and mainly Mary had become the subject of neighborhood gossip. Deeply embarrassed, Mary broke down and expressed a desire to return to their former home. Incidentally, Mary thought she was good at socializing with neighbors, but in reality, it was quite the opposite. She was treated like a touchy subject. After paying us and following their move, Mary and Robert found themselves lamenting their now empty pockets. However, we definitely won't be offering any financial help. They should save on their beloved suites and try to manage on their own. Meanwhile, with Mary gone, I'm thoroughly enjoying my freedom every day. Our electricity bill has completely returned to normal, and now I'm contemplating which suites to buy next.